Let me go ahead and call this meeting of the regular meeting of the Operations Planning Committee to order for Monday, April 22nd at 4 o'clock. Thanks for everybody for joining. Tracy, I know you're under some time pressure. We'll let you go first.
Thank you so much. Yes, I have a meeting at 4:30, so I appreciate that. This will be very quick. We are going to be on the floor probably nonstop between now and May 8th. I am in district today, but I'll be in Hartford from here on out. And it's been a little bit crazy. I'm still unsure about exactly what we're going to be seeing. We still don't have final language on a lot of the things that are coming our way, but we do know there's some battles around our fiscal guardrails. We do know that UConn and the colleges are looking for more funding. We do have some housing bills with as of right information in it. So those are kind of the things I'm seeing. Transportation, we've seen a few things with the undocumented workers driver's license, the drive only that was passed out of committee. We in Connecticut support and want our undocumented workers to be able to drive. And so we allow them to get a special driver's license that's not for federal use, but the Transportation Committee passed out of committee that they would take the information off of that driver's license that says that it is only for driving, which is going to be very confusing when it comes to voting. Moving on, I want to send out a thank you to a lot of the women-owned businesses that participated in a little PR campaign with me, and even the town hall. All the women that run town hall came out and had a little photo op, which was good fun and a great way to appreciate all the women-run businesses we have in town. Driving. I wanted to point out, because I don't think I did this last time, that there was a PSA announcement from the Attorney General and the Commissioner of Consumer Protection on a lot of the cannabis products that you may be seeing, not necessarily in the not necessarily not in the official cannabis shops, but sold illegally, and they look like kids products. You may have seen some of this on TV. Like they look like Cheetos, but they're not Cheetos. They look like Doritos, but they're not Doritos. But just to let everybody know that if you do come across this, or or some of the kids do, that there's a site on the Attorney General's website to report this. We really need to crack down on these. And then moving off of that, I know we've had some, and I believe I know our first selectman will discuss this. I've had some outreach from people around Darien and even in Stamford, as well as a state representative from Stamford, about a cannabis shop that's going to be opening up right there as you go into Stamford. And tomorrow night at Sal's, there will be a meeting, and I'll let John Zagrodzky touch on that. But I wanted to let everybody know from the state level the issues about this, and have it kind of be official that we do have it in statute, that there is municipal authority around the establishment of cannabis shops. So a lot of the zoning does refer back to the municipal authorities. There is an allotment of how many cannabis shops that a municipality may hold, and it's every 25,000 people triggers another cannabis shop that is allowed in that municipality. So besides the few written regulations within the state government, a lot of the zoning issues go back to the town. So, and if anybody is confused or, wants to know more about that, the Stamford Zoning Board has all that information, but they are allowing people to speak at the Stamford boarding discussion. That is on April 29th. And again, I believe John Zagrodzky will have more on that later. And I think that is, One last thing I know, I continue to advocate for our schools here. We've had some unfunded mandates being pushed down from the state, particularly around reading programs. And there's not necessarily movement in that yet, but we are continuing to push the State Department of Education on this, and I hoping that we'll see some sort of movement, because I think we have municipalities across the state that are really frustrated with how this mandate was pushed onto the towns. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
What date does the session wrap up, Tracy?
May 8th.
Hey, any questions for Tracy? I appreciate that update.
Who's charged with enforcement on the cannabis shops? Because I'm hearing that there are a lot of people just opened them up illegally.
So cannabis shops have to go through, for them to legally be open, that they have to get a permit through the state. And they're regulated through DCP. But if you have a smoke shop, that doesn't have a special permit. And so the policing on the smoke shops fall to our local police departments. So I know Norwalk has really struggled with that. They have 17 smoke shops in Norwalk, and trying to make sure that they're only selling tobacco and they're not selling weed is a real issue. As quick as they can confiscate the weed that they may be or are selling, they're getting filled back up with it through the back door. Take it out the front, fill it in the back. So it's a real struggle. Norwalk is really struggling with that. I'm assuming Stanford is as well, but I don't cover Stanford, so I haven't talked to them.
We have two shops that I know of within walking distance of Darien in Stanford, in Glenbrook and in Springdale. And, you just wonder.
Yeah, they have rules about how far they can be away from each other. They have rules about how far they can be away from schools. So that's something that the zoning board in Stanford will certainly be taking into account.
Okay. Tracy, thank you. Much appreciated. Jim, I think you're on
for a little while, and then I'll jump off if that's okay.
Okay, sure. Jim, I know you've got a little time pressure. You're next.
Yeah. Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. I guess by way of update, just to remind everybody, our board kind of culminated our part of the overall budget process on Tuesday, April 9th. We, after making some adjustments to the various different operating budgets and capital budgets, adjusting for bonding and sort of some contributions from our general fund and taking into account some upcoming appropriations that are likely or maybe kind of coming down the pipeline, we ultimately passed a final mill rate and budget that'll go to the RTM, and Seth and his colleagues will vote on that on Monday, May 13th. I think, Seth, right?
Yeah, I have the draft warning now for the Rules Committee, which meets next Tuesday. There are some questions about some of these special appropriations as to timing, because we got a June 3 RTM meeting, and if that's too close because you just don't have time to react, it's good to know that I can cancel the June 3, move it later, and make it a special to cover things like the special ed transportation. I don't know whether that's going to be in time for the budget meeting, or the special appropriation for security, $1,074,000, or the special appropriation for Great Island, Massamenas, $2 million. If those are going to need to be approved, then by the RTM, I don't want to have a regular meeting on June 3 and then look at a special meeting later in June to, when they're actually passed by the board. So that's a question I have, I guess, for selectmen and finance.
Well, Seth, I'd say everything related to the actual budget, setting the mill rate and so forth, and all of the special appropriations have been approved by the various boards will all be in front of you on the May 13 meeting, right?
Yep, I've got that. Yep.
So I think in terms of the other ones that are percolating, unless John tells me I'm missing one, the Board of Ed may potentially have a small operating deficit that they need to clear up from the end of fiscal 2024. We'll know more about that in the coming weeks. There's a security appropriation that the Board of Ed is further discussing tonight, and I know John's board is ultimately going to discuss, and I'll come to ours. We'll keep you updated on that, but like timing of that, we'll just have to keep our eyes open. And then as it relates to the item related to Great Island, a couple $1 million, which will help kind of cover the cost of a consultant if and when it's chosen over the next few weeks and so forth as part of that interview process, should all likely be done, should be done before your June meeting. But everything you need, like for the budget, is signed off.
Yeah, no, I've got that. Now it's just there's a couple of special ones that are kind of, still haven't got a real decision time frame on them yet. I hear you. We'll stay alert.
So maybe just a couple things for the overall public, as part of us setting the mill rate, the mill rate is obviously down academically because the overall grand list is up by close to 25%. The taxes that we're going to raise are going to be approximately 4.3% more than what were raised last year. And I guess I should just caveat this in terms of what we're recommending to the RTM. That'll have total taxes raised go up by 4.3%. It'll have the average taxes to each homeowner, property owner in town go up by approximately 6%. And that's due to some of the shifting of the grand list, which we talked to extensively during our meeting. So I would certainly recommend that any interested parties kind of listen to that meeting. And then, the last sort of important piece of that was we took $3 million from the town's general fund, previously tax dollars, which we kind of sometimes refer to as a rainy day fund or our reserve fund, right? We allocated $3 million of that to be dedicated towards this budget and or special appropriations that are coming along on a parallel process to this in this budget cycle. That $3 million will use up roughly half of the excess that we have, which is above the Board of Finance traditional stated goal and a newly created Moody's target, which was rolled out a month or so ago. So there's a lot of debate on our board about what we thought would be the right amount to use as we think about maintaining our AAA rating and but also trying to offset some of the unusually high operating budgets that we saw this year. Where we ultimately ended up was $3 million. So in terms of other things, we have a meeting coming up in a few weeks where we'll deal with some more transfers and closing out some projects and so forth. But the Board of Finance will have a relatively light scheduled set of meetings over the next few months, but we will, as we have in the past, roll out a lot of different sort of projects that we'll look at, reevaluating our policy around the reserve fund, looking at beginning to set guidance and forecasting for next year's budget. I know this one's not even done yet, but we need to kind of get well ahead of that and some other projects we're looking at.
The one thing I'd add to that is Jim and I have talked about the communications that need to underlie any good budget process. And so one of our summer projects, if you will, this year is to spend time not only trying to shape the budget process for next year, but also to talk a lot about sort of pre-syndication of ideas or as I've described to people, it's the cake instead of batter. So in other words, instead of waiting till the last minute on any particular project and presenting that to both our boards, to let us kind of taste the batter before that project gets fully baked so that we can get a sense of that. We can talk about the analyses, talk about the need, talk about the prioritization. And I just think strengthening what I think is already a good process, but making it a great process for that kind of early communication on potentially controversial aspects of our budgets, no matter what part of town it's in. I think will make next year's process better. So he and I will be spending some time on that in the coming months to try to help people get to an even better process for 26. Any questions for Jim? Unless that was it. Anything else from you, Jim?
No, that's it.
Okay. Any questions for Jim?
No, yeah, Seth, I'll say a couple of committees have reached out and asked if, if they had some questions relating to the budget and or asked us to attend one of their subcommittee meetings or district caucuses and so forth. So certainly if folks need input from us or need some background and more information, obviously anything that we have, we're happy to kind of share with you. And if I can't be available, I'm sure one of my fellow board members could help out.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, I think the dialogue has been terrific.
And I would also say, we did go to market also on April 9th. It was a busy day for another approximately $80 million worth of bonds, half of which were to refinance half of the purchase price of Great Island. And we did so over by issuing another sort of 1-year bond, what we call a bond anticipation note, which came off at 3.4%. And the other part of that $80 million issuance was refinancing a like amount of bond anticipation notes, which were issued in connection with the HHR renovation. If you recall, we did that as a 1-year note just because we weren't sure about the cadence of when that projects were, when they were going to begin to take place and so forth. Now that's all been approved and they all have sort of signed construction documents, and I think in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, equipment will start to be put to work. We've financed that first third of the HHR projects over 20 years at a tax exempt rate that was also 3.4%.
So rates have come off a little bit. Looked like it was a good opportunity.
Yes, the rates that we ultimately bonded, over 20 years, the HHR portion of the bond deal was about 30 basis points lower than the short-term piece of paper we issued for that project a year ago. So it certainly made sense. I mean, rates were a little bit higher than where they were, but municipals have performed quite well. So the important thing is, I think, for you all to take away is that we had, over 15 different banks bidding on our various pieces of our bond deal, very well received, a relatively competitive outcome. And so I think it shows that our paper and our bonding and, the investment community's desire to continue to lend money to Darien is still, very strong.
Great.
Just as strong as when John led the board.
Even slightly stronger, just because Jim is far more quick. Anyway, Jim, we appreciate all that you do there. So thank you.
Thanks, John. And last thing, I'll just make a shout out to the other 6 members of my board. As you guys know, none of these boards work without the help of all the board members. And so, while I may talk a little bit more than others, all 7 people on our board put a lot of time and work into the budget and this bonding and everything, along with staff over the past 4 months. So, big shout out to them as well.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Seth.
Yes, well, we did not, we will not have an April 30 meeting of the RTM. We didn't have our April 29. We just didn't have enough business to do. So we'll move right to the budget meeting. We did get all the budget numbers for most of the meeting of the RTM. The standard set of budget items have all been approved by the Board of Finance, sent to us. I thank Jen Charneski for a lovely memorandum she sent me, which allowed me to put the warning together. That's really the biggest thing on our plate. Rules Committee meets next Tuesday night, and we'll then pass the budget for the RTM meeting. The warning. And I just lost you somewhere here. Can you still see me?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll just keep going somewhere. This thing, let me find the Zoom, there's Zoom. There we are. Now I can see you. Something shut me off there for a second. Only other things that we have that we're looking at in the Rules Committee is just trying to finish off the work we've been doing on Appendix B. The budget really has gotten in the way of that, all of the work that we're doing there. And we're looking at the start time for RTM meetings, talking about that, whether we should, we thought we would send out a survey to the RTM and ask them if they'd like to start the meetings earlier. A lot of the board meetings in town start at 7:30, and there's some thought that given changes in schedules in current times, that having an earlier RTM meeting might actually be something more comfortable for the members. So we'll see how that goes, see what the results of that are. We're looking at a noise. I don't think it's going to be an ordinance. It's going to be some other solution. We'll be hearing from the Health and Social Services Committee about that. They're looking at it, but it turns out that a lot of the noise complaints don't come from garbage trucks, et cetera, or mowing lawns or whatever. They think it comes from other things. So we may be going in a different direction there. And we will have a vote on the Pledge of Allegiance, having the Pledge of Allegiance in the RTM. That will come up most likely in the June meeting. So that's sort of what's going on. The sooner we know about these special appropriations, the better, because when they are approved, will have a bearing on when the RTM meets. We'd like to just keep, obviously, our regularly scheduled meeting for June the 3rd, but we can meet it if we have to, because these are not the things that are still sort of hanging fire are not insignificant. So we'll just, as I said earlier with Jim, we'll just sort of hang in there and see how it plays out. Questions?
Anybody? Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Seth. Mr. Olvani.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate it. So what happened? Since our last meeting, we approved the building over at 7 Sedgwick, which is at the entrance of the Good Wife Shopping Center. It's going to be 18. It's proposed to be 18 dwelling units, 2 stories, or 2-story building over a layer of parking. So it's effectively a 3-story building. As part of that project, we now have a 14% affordable housing component that's in every single building, multifamily building, mixed-use building that's over 5 units. In that project, we did a fee in lieu from the developer for that. The fee in lieu amount's going to be about $903,000 is what it equates to in today's dollars. And that'll go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The money will not hit the trust fund or not be even due and payable until the building gets a temporary certificate of occupancy, was effectively at least 3 years out, and based on simple educated guesses on when they can start the building and finish the building. On our next meeting, we're going to go over the Hanson Road Bridge project, which is a quasi-municipal project that's adjacent to the Weber and Country Club. In our next meeting, which is tomorrow night, we're also going to go over the request for the Board of Education for special education buses to be parked in town. 2 more SUV is going to be over at 35 Leroy is the request, and then an additional set of what they call I think it's class 3 buses over at Thorndale Circle Office Park for a couple of years. So that's something that's going to be on our agenda tomorrow night. And back in March 12th, which was after, I guess, our meeting, we had a public hearing on the possibility of changing an ordinance in town for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, or known as granny pods or mother-in-law apartments. They have multiple different names of what people can call them. I think the public hearing was successful. For the majority, I would say, of the people thought it was a good idea. It does need a little bit of tweaking. We kept public testimony open for another, I think, 7 days for written testimony after that hearing. And then last week we got some additional letters after the hearing closed. And then last week we got another letter from the Commission on Aging. They had a board meeting and they submitted some testimony for the record too. If you're a board or a commission in the town of Darien, we will accept testimony up till before we vote on it, since it's a officially designated entity in town. What else is on the list? On our April 8th, and it's a little bit ironic, we've been talking about it a lot. On our April 8th, or I'm sorry, April 2nd, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we voted to direct staff to write up a prohibition of any cannabis businesses in the town of Darien or cannabis dispensaries. The wording in our Planning and Zoning Commission is, in a way it's always been in practice, if it's not permitted, it's automatically prohibited. And that's how we've stanced when cannabis was started in the state capital. I think it's 6 or 8 years ago, if my memory's correct. It's something like that. We did a 1 or 2 year moratorium, which was allowed to review the I guess the legislation and the laws and how we want to handle it. Some of our other peer towns have outlawed cannabis in their towns, and that's what we voted or directed staff to draft up a zoning text amendment to put in an amendment in our zoning code to do that. We will be discussing that at a public hearing, probably in the middle of June. If everyone reads the papers, there was a cannabis building that, and Tracy touched on a little bit, that is currently proposed on the border of town. I think John Zagrodsky will fill us in on what we need to know relative to that. So I'll leave that for him. Up in Hartford, we're continuing to monitoring state legislation and how it affects our town. There is one House bill. It's called House Bill 5390, which came out recently. They want to. It's been something that's bounced around, to my knowledge, in my time on the P&Z. It's about 6 years. I think it's bounced around. The current form of that is you can allow it overrides all zoning codes effectively, and you could put 9 dwelling units per acre anywhere. In a town of ours, that's a town that's designated as a transit-oriented town, which Darien's got 2 train stations and then another 3 train stations out of borders. We're designated as a town. We're trying to find out, and Tracy can help us out in some way, shape, or form, if that bill is going to go forward. As I said in our last OPC meeting, we monitor that stuff, so we will write testimony or draft a letter, probably under my signature, to the powers that be in those committees, saying that that's not something that the town of Darien Planning and Zoning Commission wants. We'll review that again tomorrow night at our meeting, just to make sure all the planning zoning commissioners are on the same page. So that's something that's kind of important. What else? A couple of quick items. I think Jim and Jill hasn't done it yet, but I'll take a little bit of Jill's thunder right now. Sorry, Jill. HHR has started construction at all of the schools, or I would call it pre-construction staging. The temporary electric light poles are up on the 2 or 3 schools that I looked at. They've laid the gravel work to start construction. I got a sneaking suspicion if school gets out on June 13th, which is about a Wednesday or a Thursday, you might have trucks there on that Friday, or at least on that Monday. So that's moving forward. It sounds like Jim got some more bond funding for that. With regards to some of to the other big projects we have in town, the Corbin District is still a big, huge hole in the ground. They're doing dewatering. They're still pouring concrete in the bottom of the hole. And you don't see any construction coming up at this point in time. But I think that's probably another, 2 or 3 weeks out. So they're still doing excavating. With regards to the Palmer's project, which we call Palmer's, but it's really known as Heights Crossing today. They have three buildings are going to be built there and a parking garage. The first building's been topped off. It's back off of the Heights Road, and all the framing for the second level is on there. All those buildings are going to be, again, 3 stories, which is effectively one level of retail on the ground floor or commercial on the ground floor, and then 2 levels of apartments above. I think that's most of the highlights for us. We've got a big, a full public hearing tomorrow night, and then a bunch of other stuff on the subsequent Thursday. That's when I think I said that already. We're supposed to go over the ADU draft resolution on May 7th on where that's going to come out. I don't think we'll pass it that day. That is a big Darien High School lacrosse game on May 7th under the lights of the high school. So I would rather be at the high school at a lacrosse game than at a P&Z commission meeting watching our boys play if people don't mind. But there are 5 other commissioners on my commission, and they can handle it. That's it for me from up here in the booth. Any questions? Go ahead, hit me.
Well, being chair does have its privileges.
That is for sure. You have a vice chair with young kids that none of his kids are in high school. I think my friend Jim Palin, he might have missed a few of his meetings for his kids' games. Since he's got a kid at TCU now, that was a stud football player back in the day.
Excellent. Any questions for Steve? Okay, terrific. Jill.
Hey, you guys have touched on a lot of my stuff. Thank you. I appreciate it. I was mobile, so thanks for taking care of it. I'll start with Tracy with reading. We're also following the reading legislation. We had talked about the possibility of needing budgetary funds this upcoming year for fiscal year 25. At this time, we have funds already for a pilot, and we have nothing planned beyond that. So we are not expecting there to be any sort of financial implication for fiscal year 25. Though, of course, we'll continue to follow the legislation or the legislative process and continue to feel that local control around the selection of curriculum is critical, as well as curriculum selection based on actual performance and reading acumen versus just existence of programs. Steve, yep, thank you for taking my thunder. And Jim, thank you for the bonding. HHR is up and running. We had electricians and other folks in the buildings in April. Trailers for the construction people will go in May. Our graduation date is June 13th. Our last day of school is June 14th. So we're expecting that there'll be shovels or the equivalent thereof on the different properties that following Monday. We'll be holding information sessions for all of the parents in the coming weeks, parents and staff. And then we also have reached out to the neighboring communities with a flyer, just sort of about the project and indicating who people can contact if they have any questions for going forward. On the Board of Ed, the budget is back on our desks. Thank you, Jim, to you and your board for passing the majority of it. We'll be taking a look at how to adjust for the $2 million that did not pass. And we plan to do that over a series of meetings, May 7th, May 14th, and May 28th, to give everybody staff time to make a proposal and the public time to hear and listen to our deliberations to follow along. We do have 3 appropriations out, as you guys have mentioned. The first is the transportation appropriation. As Steve said, that's at planning and zoning at the same time as it's also been through the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. Seth, that is at both of your RTM committees, and I'm expecting you'll see that in May. The security appropriation, we need an executive session to brief folks on the Board of Selectmen, Finance, and whoever on the RTM is appropriate. My board will be discussing in executive session some protocols for handling various aspects of security, including communication and how they're discussed once these sorts of requests leave our borders. And so it may not be completely in time for this proposal, but we'll have some guidance for you all, just keeping the safety and security of our school children in mind. The third appropriation Jim mentioned already is that we are running a small deficit for unexpected expenses for fiscal year 24. And we are planning to, we're looking at an appropriation request for that tomorrow night. That would then go to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and then on to the RTM. That is planned for your June meeting.
Okay.
And again, we're hoping that it, is as small as it possibly can be, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $200,000. And we'll be walking through the mechanics in the coming days. And we'll certainly be in touch with each of you all. And we thank you for your forbearance.
Questions
That's all
for
I
Jill?
have.
Okay, thank you. Round things out, a few things for me. This is just a disjointed order, but all my notes on this paper. First is we did have an OPC meeting, or a department head meeting today, and went through kind of all the town departments. Two things I'll just mention for the general public. One is lock your cars. There was a further discussion just of car break-ins and car thefts. It's not that it's on the rise dramatically, but again and again, the main driver of some of that is the fact that too many folks are leaving their cars unlocked. That is creating a reputation for Darien outside of our town, that this place is an easy target. So just as a reminder, please lock your cars. Second thing is that all the recent voting changes have made life for our registrars and for the town clerk's office a lot more difficult in terms of voting management. So this is early voting mainly, but also just absentee ballots and the fact that we've got a number of important elections coming up. Everybody knows about the presidential election, but there's a prospect for primaries and all of that. The registrars are in desperate need of volunteers to help staff the polling stations for early voting. Just as an example, the presidential election will have 14 days of early voting. We need help with volunteers to ensure that we have adequate staffing for that. So if you are interested in learning about that process, please contact, call me and I'll put you in contact with the right person, or just contact the voter registrars and express your interest in that, and they will be very happy to sign you up. Board of Selectmen will take up the town's flag policy again at the request of a couple of our members, and we'll be discussing that at one of our meetings in May. I'm still trying to sort out the exact timing, but we'll make sure notice goes out to the town to make sure anyone who has an interest in speaking on that is knows about it and can come and participate in that discussion. So you all know that we voted the other day, and it was in the paper last week, to delay the implementation of our plans for the Weed Beach development. So this is down by the old short lane stub there off of there in the bay. And that project was put on hold because the cost estimates were like twice what we expected at about 1.9 million versus cost estimates of $1 million. Parks and Rec is meeting on Wednesday night, and I'll be participating in that meeting. And one of their discussion items is to talk about kind of next steps on that in terms of potentially remediating some area where there was some clear cutting earlier in the year, as well as just generally what we could do next to kind of move something along there. But stay tuned. So more to come on that particular project. There are a couple of Board of Education security measures, which we've talked about. I'm still working to get a briefing on all of that to the various boards so that we can try to get that moved along for you, Jill. I see that that's not scheduled yet, but I'm going to try to get that done this week. So stay tuned for that. Tracy and a few of you have mentioned this issue of the cannabis business that's proposed for the current location of Smoky Joe's and the Boatyard Barbecue that's over right there on the Norton River across from Giovanni's and on the Stamford border. By way of quick background, that's been approved by the planning board in Stamford. In Stamford, their planning and zoning functions is split into two boards, a planning board and a zoning board. The planning board approved it. And at some point in their process, there will be a public hearing to discuss this, and then a final vote on that establishment by the zoning board. My understanding is that won't take place before May 20th. We've had a great deal of outreach from affected folks in that area, actually both Darien and Stanford citizens, to express concerns about the establishment of that business. There is a meeting that is taking place at the Water's Edge at Giovanni's, again, right across the street from the proposed establishment location, tomorrow night at 6:30. There should be quite a crowd there. It is going to be a presentation by Nautilus Botanicals, who's going to talk about the establishment of that business and answer questions from the community. I would urge anyone who's interested in or this topic or has concerns about the establishment of that business to try to attend that presentation. I certainly will be there. I think Tracy Mara, depending on her schedule in Hartford, will try to come, and I will certainly speak if I've got a chance to talk about that. There have been a few articles published on it where I've spoken at length about this and was interviewed by News 12 last week. So do a little searching on that and you'll see what my more extensive comments are. I remain concerned about the establishment of businesses like that, so close to residential areas as well as preschools, the YMCA, all of that. I think it's not in the best interest of those folks. And so, again, if you have a concern about this, please attend tomorrow night's meeting. Stay tuned, and I will continue to speak out about this. Our Great Island effort continues to move along. My thanks to the Great Island Committee chaired by Monica McNally, and Jim is on that committee as well. They are in the process of finalizing selection of a consultant who would work in parallel with the committee to move along our design and development efforts as to what's next. We've got 4 finalists who completed the bids properly, and I know the committee is going to be considering that, and I believe they're going to try to announce a recommended decision to the Board of Selectmen at their May 15th meeting, and our goal would be to have these folks in place and working by July 1st. And I think the pace will pick up quite a bit once those folks are in place. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with and next steps on all that. The swap shop has been closed for a bit longer than what we had hoped. The original open date was going to be April 1st. I'm told by the team working on it that they will open the swap shop back up again on May 2nd. So I wanted to thank specifically Susan Cameron, Reese Hutchison, and others who have worked on this, Carolyn Bain as well. I appreciate everybody's efforts in trying to sort through some of the issues that we've had. It looks like we've got good resolution. So please, if you've got things that you want to bring by the swap shop, May 2nd is opening date, and we look forward to having you there. I visited a couple of businesses lately over in Darien Commons. Today I did a ribbon cutting at Salt and Sweat, which is a new business that's just opened up. And I also participated in a bread making class at Sur la Table, which is kind of like a Williams Sonoma on steroids. It's over in Darien Commons as well. Look, if you haven't been over there to look at some of these businesses, a lot of them are just opening up. Definitely take some time. Sur la Table, you go inside, it's amazing how much money you can spend there on super cool kitchen stuff. And their classes are terrific. Some people ate my bread. There were no fatalities tasting the stuff that I made. So that's a miracle in and of itself. But I was just really impressed by that. The Salt and Sweat team today, they've got a very interesting facility for kind of health and wellness around massages and sauna rooms and all of that. A very thoughtfully put together business. And so there's a lot of businesses just opening up over there. So please go over to Darien Commons and take a look. You will be impressed. A couple of weeks ago, I had a chance, and I'm embarrassed to say I did not know much about this, but it's called Darien Book Aid. So this is over on the Post Road, across the street from Papa Joe's, down the road from the St. John's Catholic Church, and right next to the Christian Science Reading Room. So Darien Book Aid takes in unused books and distributes them to a variety of places, including folks overseas who are looking to support literacy programs. They're in particular need of children's books as well as books in Spanish. It's just a very impressive group. These were dedicated volunteers in what used to be an old firehouse. that actually has some offices upstairs with furniture that dates back to the 40s and 50s and hasn't been changed as far as I can tell. There was even a July 1941 copy of Life magazine on the table, and I'm not sure that's moved much either. Definitely, if you've got used books to take to those folks or want to contribute to them, I was just very impressed by all that. And thank you to those folks, Peggy Twitchell, their president, and others who gave me a tour. It's terrific. Slightly somber note, I was invited along with some others to do a screening of a movie called Bear Witness. It was a compilation of footage captured during the October attacks into Israel from Gaza. And the purpose of that was just to highlight just how terrible things are over there. It's footage that was not available to the general public. It was a little difficult to go see that. It's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. But all I can tell you is that if it's something that you are following and are passionate about, pray for those people. That is a terrible situation over there, horrifying beyond words to see what goes on in that part of the world. And I sincerely hope that peace somehow comes to that region and the suffering for those folks ends. Last point I just want to make is that in all of this, from all our budget process to the various groups that I've gone to see just in the last few weeks, it's a reminder just how much Darien works on the energy of our volunteers, whether you're serving in an elected capacity or working at a place like Darien Book Aid. The number of folks that I find are just dedicated to their little niche of making Darien a better place. I'm just amazed by that every day. And so once again, not to sound like a broken record, I really am appreciative of the folks who volunteer their time, especially everybody on this call. So thank you to folks in Darien who volunteer. Your efforts are certainly appreciated by me, and I know by many others. So that's it for my comments. Does anyone have any questions for me? Okay. I believe the last item on our agenda is to approve our minutes. That actually was the first item. I have read through this. This is our minutes from the March 11th meeting. Everything looked good to me. Does anyone have any corrections or edits to the minutes? Seeing none, could I please get a motion to approve those minutes? Steve moves. Jill is going to second. If I heard her hand. Jill seconds. All in favor? Okay, terrific. I'll take that as unanimous. I don't have anything else. Anything else for the good of the order today?
When's our next meeting?
That is an excellent question. I will pass that around. I do not have that handy. It may. I forget.
I'll look it up. I'll be right there.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We'll get that for you here directly. But we'll look forward to that next meeting. I'm sorry, Jill, when was graduation again? I wrote that down. Is it June? What was it?
The 13th.
13th. Got it.
The next meeting is May 20th.
May 20th for the next OPC meeting. Okay. Terrific. Anything else? All righty. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. And Jill seconds. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, friends. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.